individuals that I have worked with through this community. And our first speaker is going to be Emma. I've known Emma for 3-ish years now, and the first time I met Emma, she walked into the Anchorage Transgender community in a full Air Force uniform with her styled, male uniform hair, and said nothing the entire meeting. 3 years later, she's this wonderful woman who is doing so many things with her life that I'm so proud to see, and hopefully we'll get to see all of the wonderful things that she gets to do. And so, welcome Emma. Out.
My name is Emma Horner. Like Oliver was saying, I was in the Air Force for...
Turn off that mic. Okay.
I was in the Air Force for 8.5 years. So I was there for the time whenever it was not legal for me to be out, then the time where it was okay for me to be out, and then the time where they decided that they wanted to not let it be okay for me to be out. So kind of went through a whole gamut of things there. When I first came out was before I was technically supposed to be out or doing any transitional things in the military. I happened across my best friend now. She is now living in Los Angeles, unfortunately. She's still in the Air Force, and she was able to get me started on hormones before I was supposed to be started on hormones, which was exciting and wonderful, and that came at a time in my life where I was at such a low point. My wife of 10 years decided that we shouldn't be together at that point, and it was pretty amicable split up, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, she picked me up and said, hey, I know a way to get you started on your hormones. Don't worry about it. It's going to be completely fine. We'll just live on the outskirts of what's actually legal at this point. So I did, and so I was there whenever the policy changed with Barack Obama, and all of a sudden it was okay for us to be out. We started to kind of get our ducks in a row as far as how to do transitioning within the military. What were the steps to do? What we needed to do? And myself and my friend and our people there that worked at the medical clinic. We all started working together to kind of figure out a good way to get these types of things done. We had to send in our information to a third party to get it approved so that they could say, yeah, you're, I guess, trans enough to start transitioning. And we both, myself and her, we both got approved for our gender confirming surgeries, which was like the best day ever. And unfortunately, they told us that they weren't going to pay for that. So you can do it, but pay for it yourself. So eventually, I got the money together, and I picked out the surgeon that I wanted to go to and everything, and set up a date. And it was around that time when a transition of power happened, and a certain individual became president of the United States, and decided that it wasn't cool for us to do like anything anymore. And so my surgeon, who was prior military as well, called me up one day just out of the blue and said, hey, would it be cool if I paid for this for you so that being how the military kind of took back what they gave you? And of course I said, yeah. Why not? I guess so. Which was extremely exciting and wonderful. So she was very excited because I was going to be the first person in the United States military to get my gender confirming surgery done, which happened about a year ago, which was the most painful thing that I have ever gone through in my entire life. That was a thing. That was a whole ordeal. However, unfortunately, because of this, the people, my command, they didn't seem too thrilled that I was getting all of this done and getting all this attention and everything, and I guess they decided that I didn't need to be in the military anymore. So they, I don't want to say fabricated a story, but fabricated a story about me missing a couple things that I was supposed to go to that was very, very much at, but decided that they were going to make it so that I couldn't re-enlist. So I wasn't able to re-enlist whenever my enlistment came up at, oh goodness, beginning of this year sometime. And so I had to get out of the military. The great part and the joke that was on them is that the military actually ended up paying me to get out. So, yeah, and now I am going to UAA. I'm going for psychology. And my plan is to specialize in LGBT care so that I can help out anybody who needs to get started on their journeys. And that's me.
Please give him another round of applause. Our next speaker is going to be a dear friend of mine. I think I've known you 4 or 5 years, I think maybe. Yeah, and I met him pretty early on when I moved to Anchorage. He was probably one of the first people, I guess the first people that I had met up here who were trans and sort of in the newest stages of like figuring that out. At that time I'd only been up in Anchorage about like 3 or 4 months, and I was like still really sure about my place here. As you know, like there's lots of great things about Anchorage, but there's also not so great things about Anchorage. But I think he was able to really help me see that like there was a welcome community here. So I really, really thank him. So our next speaker is Cal. He uses he and his pronouns, and he is a transgender man.
I didn't really want to get off track, so. Alright. Yeah, as Oliver said, my name is Cal Bacon. I'm a 25-year-old trans man. And I started my transition about 3 years ago, thanks to the help of a brother trans man who provided me with my first batch of testosterone when my primary provider refused to because I was about 220 pounds. Basically said that I was overweight, they were worried for my heart conditions, yada, yada, yada. So in order for me to finally feel comfortable in my own body, I had to take a risk and break the rules. As soon as I started taking testosterone, I felt like I was reborn as my true self. I was invigorated with the possibilities of what the future would bring. As long as I can remember, I felt like I was a boy. It wasn't until adults pointed out to me that I couldn't run around with my shirt off like the other boys that I realized that I was different. There must have been a mistake because I knew who I was. Every night before I fell asleep, I prayed that I would magically wake up as a real boy. Every night, I dreamt of what it would be like to finally have my physical self represent the person that I was on the inside. Every time that I blew out birthday candles, saw a shooting star, or found an eyelash on my cheek, I would wish for the same thing. Please, make me a real boy. As I grew older, I lost hope and grew to believe that my dream was an impossible one. About age 8 was when my disposition turned from hopeful and optimistic to bleak and depressing. It was during this time that I experienced huge changes in my life. My mother and father decided to separate, so I moved from our private and secluded property in Valdez to a crowded neighborhood in the big city of Anchorage with my mother. I know it's not really a big city to a lot of people, but Valdez is a really small town, so it was a big change for me. Fast food? Movie theaters? Yeah. On top of that, my mother was suffering with severe depression and alcoholism after a breakup with my father. For 10 years, she suffered with her mental illness alone. I was her only support system. She did not have any close friends and was estranged from her family. She did not have any help from any mental health professionals. So for 10 years, I played the role of caretaker, therapist, and friend, as well as child. Needless to say, this was not a positive environment for someone to grow up in. It also plunged me into a deep depression, including suicidal ideation since I was 9 years old. I'm an only child, and since my mom was estranged from my family, I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my awesome cousins like Quinn. Shout out there. When I tell people that I'm an only child, they either say, "But you're not a spoiled brat," or "You're so lucky, you didn't have to deal with annoying siblings." Now, I was spoiled, actually, very much so by my grandma and my mom. I was showered with gifts and presents during every holiday and birthday, or just because. But I'm happy that I didn't end up as a spoiled and materialistic adult. However, I would like to encourage everyone who has the privilege of having siblings, give them a hug and tell them how lucky you are to have them in your life. Any mental health professional will tell you the best medicine for people is healthy and supportive relationships. In case you haven't figured it out by now, things do not matter in this world, but people do. Your friends, family, and loved ones are what will bring you the most joy and comfort in life. We all spend our lives trying to run away from our immense loneliness. Fulfilling hobbies and work are great ways to fight the loneliness, but they're no match for the people that love and care for you just as much as you love and care for them. As you can infer from what I've told you so far, my childhood was incredibly lonely. I didn't have much confidence in myself and never felt like taking care of my body because what's the point if I'm never going to look like a guy? I didn't connect with most of my peers because I felt so incredibly different. They all seemed to be completely comfortable with themselves. They seemed to have loving and supportive families that took care of them. How would I possibly be able to connect with any of them? I spent most of my adolescent years alone. If I wasn't studying, then I was immersing myself in fantasy worlds either through reading, playing video games, or watching movies. I became addicted to doing anything that let me escape my real life. It was often the only thing that kept me from ending everything. However, I was fortunate enough to have a few friends that lived in the neighborhood. In elementary school, I had a best friend that wandered into my garage one day, just asked if I wanted to play. After that, we would always run away together to fantasy worlds of our own creating. We eventually moved apart, but I'm lucky enough to still call him a friend. We have a friendship that I know will last a lifetime. We know that no matter how far apart we are, our souls are still connected. He saved me from my darkness when I was a kid. In high school, I was also able to have a close friendship with twins who lived down the street from me. We would often have long conversations on the phone. We'd take turns having each other over to watch TV shows or anime while drinking tea. I look back on those times and think of the inner peace that they brought me. They also saved me from my darkness many times when I was a teen. Unfortunately, our friendship did not last when I came out to them as transgender. They were raised very conservative and struggled with the fact that I was their friend and that they cared about me, but that they didn't believe someone could be a different gender than what they were assigned at birth. It broke my heart to lose their friendship and to hear that they were not able to support me even through all that we'd been through together. However, I still love them and wish them well, even though I had to say goodbye. I explained I only have room for supportive people in my life right now and people who love me for who I am. Even so, coming out as transgender was the best thing that I've ever done. Naturally, I was filled with anxiety and dread. I was afraid of the people that would reject me like my friends had. However, I was pleasantly surprised by the overwhelming amount of support and love from so many different people in my life. I was told by so many people that they were proud of me for finally being my true self, and that they were inspired by my courage. I was told that I would be loved no matter what, because the person that I was inside is what mattered. These messages of support came from people inside and outside of the LGBT community. My cis male friends took me under their wing even and promised to show me the ropes of being a man. They spend a lot of time obsessing. Don't stand right next to someone when you're using the urinal. That's messed up. You have to do a space. And I was like, okay, like I'm not a weirdo. I wouldn't. So I had almost no problems with my friends adjusting to using my new name and pronoun. If anyone messed up, usually a friend of mine corrected them for me. I know this is not the case for everyone that comes out, so I consider myself extremely blessed to have such a positive coming out story. My mother and grandmother were also incredibly supportive of my transition. I burst into tears upon telling them, and they both responded the same way. Sweetie, I always knew. After all, as soon as you could speak, you said you didn't like pink and you refused to wear dresses. They also both told me that they loved me so much, but would always love me no matter what. I'm incredibly fortunate to have them both in my life. My father was the only one who didn't understand, unfortunately. When I opened up my heart to him and explained that I had always felt this way, he asked if I ever considered taking estrogen to be more feminine. This response didn't surprise me too much, as his new wife often told me things like, "You need to start dressing like a girl. You can't spit like that. You need to learn how to be more ladylike, learn how to walk rather than stomping around." I didn't know what else to say to my father other than ask him if he still wanted to be in my life. His response was, "I don't know. We haven't spoken in 3 years." I idolized my father as a child, so losing him was a huge blow for me. However, I eventually realized that I did not need him to show me what it was like to be a man. I already knew the type of man I wanted to be. I've always strived to be strong, brave, and protective, but also kind, empathetic, and understanding. I know the ideal man that I strive to be is one who can be vulnerable and open, rather than toxic masculinity of the past, which prioritizes saving face above all else. Maybe one day my father will come around and get to know the man that I have become, but if he does not, I will be okay. A huge part of overcoming adversity is being content and securing yourself so that the person whose opinion matters the most is your own. At the end of the day, the only person that I am trying to impress is myself. This is the ideal mindset that I try to have every day. I think the hard struggle that we all have to face is not from any external conflict, but rather the conflict that is always present inside of us because we're human. Every single one of us has struggled with insecurity. We all suffer from being too hard on ourselves. Many of us also suffer with intense fear and anxiety being judged by others. There are also others who have to struggle every day just to try to stay positive in a world that is overwhelmingly negative. The biggest barrier that I've ever overcome was my own self. My friends often describe me as very introspective and deep. I'm both cursed and blessed with an uncontrollable desire to see the world in its truest form and take everything in, both the good and the bad. However, it takes an incredible amount of willpower to not let my mind be overcome with hatred for people that do terrible things. It takes a lot of work for me to forgive people that are ignorant and inconsiderate, and it takes an extreme amount of effort for me not to give up on the world altogether and just say, fuck it, and live alone in a cabin in the woods. I know that I'm not the only one who experiences these struggles, and I'm able to find comfort in that. It takes conscious effort to train the mind to be more positive. My mind often experiences resistance to this, and I hear myself shouting internally, "Wake up! So much injustice is happening every day, no one cares!" I fixate on the fact that a small population has so much, while so many break their bodies and souls for scraps. I get angered by the fact that people like myself, who are privileged to live in a first world country, are so easily distracted by the pleasures that we take for granted. I get pissed off at the fact that it seems like nothing will ever change or get better. But then, I force myself to remember Viktor Frankl. He was a psychiatrist, neurologist, and Holocaust survivor. He experienced unimaginable trauma in a concentration camp, but was able to endure it, and eventually wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which detailed his experiences and what he had learned. In his book, he describes how he was able to stay positive even in the worst situation imaginable because he discovered where his true power lies. He said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." He describes how he discovered that having a positive attitude was the one thing that the Nazis could not take away from him. He describes being able to always find something to be grateful for, even if all he had that day was the fact that he was still breathing. Frankl also deeply believed in the necessity for people to find meaning in their experiences, including the negative ones. He said, "If there is meaning in life at all, then there must be meaning in suffering." I deeply agree with this statement. I've found in my life that everything has meaning if you are able to learn from it. Through each struggle that we face, we learn how to be stronger. With each ended relationship, we learn more about ourselves. With each failure, we learn how to improve next time. These are the most important lessons that I have learned on my short time on Earth. However, just because I know them to be true, doesn't mean that I don't forget them from time to time. That's why I try to surround myself with positive friends who can remind me and help me to save myself when I feel like I'm about to be swallowed up by the darkness. My hope is that this message can be spread far and wide so that we can all remind each other of the strength that exists within.
2015, and he got to be out for the first time in public as himself. So I want you all to welcome Luka. He's gonna do his thing, I guess.
Okay, if I remove this. Well, hi, I'm Luka. I go by they, them, he, his pronouns. And I'm going to start off by reading some poems to you. So, alright. The first poem is called Apologize. Here we go. I will not apologize for saying no. I will not apologize for having a voice. I will not apologize for being quiet. I will not apologize for having boundaries. I will not apologize for unshaven legs or other body hair. I will not become the scapegoat for others to blame upon. I will not change my pronouns to make it more convenient. I will not apologize for being myself. So this next poem, I literally just rewrote it while we're waiting for everyone to show up, so apologize ahead of time. I shouldn't be apologizing, right? Is that the lesson we're going to learn today? Don't apologize? All right. False projection, the misconception when people think they have the right to define my gender identity. The expectations of who I should be, the expectation who I should be, not ruled by society's illusion of acceptance. The freedom to be nobody. I am nobody else other than myself. Now, both those stories are just opening up to remind people just to be themselves, and that's why I'm here today. And the story I'm going to start off with is when I actually got first adopted here in America by an American family. I didn't know a lick of English. I couldn't really see. I couldn't really hear. I got surgeries on both my ears and my left eye. And this American family, growing up, they did not tell me I was adopted. So when I was trying to learn English, it was very difficult. Thinking that I was dumb, I couldn't understand people. Like when you wish you had a superpower, I wish that I could read people's minds. Maybe I could learn English better that way. But this family, at first, they gave what I needed, surgeries for my eyes, surgeries for the ears, and surgery on my feet. So I'm very grateful for that. My adopted family, we actually lived way out in Chickaloo, nowhere close to Anchorage, far away. So the concept of getting to know other people was not really a good option. It's very isolated. And me and my older brothers, they were also adopted. We kind of just grew up on a farm that was about 10 to 15 acres. So we learned all about working hard and pulling our own weight. So basically I grew up as a farm boy. A lot of people want to look at me and think of that maybe, You know, this punk up here, all his buttons, and walking around. How dare you? But yeah, I'm a country boy. Grew up that way. So we lived out there in Chickaloon for a while, then we moved closer to town, on the outskirts of Palmer actually, in the Matsu Valley. And we had 15 acres, but then they sold it off to 5. And we had horses, and we had pigs, and we had chickens. Yeehaw. My brothers were loving in a way, but one was a little bit too loving. The concept knowing that he knew that I was not blood, that I didn't know that I wasn't. And communication between us became a little awkward during puberty. Words, right? So my parents at the time sent me to a special speech specialist, and obviously that didn't help. But the communication I learned through my family was actually physical touch, and not the typical "I love you" visual, affection that you grow up on. My father made sure of that when he noticed that I was blooming into a woman. Yeah, he was all about that. So the idea of forming healthy relationships at a young age didn't really happen. And my brothers kind of saw that, at least one of them did, and said, well, if he's doing it, it must be okay. But it wasn't. So the house that we lived out in Palmer, I stayed there until early teens, yeah. And I think the abuse started with my father at that time, was 9 until I was like 17. And the importance of these houses is that I believe certain experiences kind of get soaked up like a sponge. You go back to a place and you can have triggers. And growing up at the farm, instead of being around that house, I was constantly running away. Like, I would just get up on my horse, be like, bye y'all. Spend my time out in the fields. It was a great way to escape. But of course, we can't escape with reality, And that reality hit me, let's see, I think that was like 15. Yeah, 15 or 16. I finally came out. I think my story was actually heard through these old letters I used to send out from my friends that I went to a Bible camp. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that my parents were very religious. Great. They think that providing protection with their kids, they would learn something about that. But God, look the other way. Growing up in that community in Palmer, I went to a Lutheran church, and when they found out what happened, they backed him up. Because my father, he used to do a lot of volunteer work. He was very well known in the church, and they could not believe it. Absolutely not. Well, before it got too crazy, Jane at the time, the motherly figure, came up to me. She actually sat me down after I got back from school, because the school found out. They sat me down in front of my teachers and oh man, this is embarrassing. So embarrassing. I get back and she's angry, but she's trying to stay calm. And she's she doesn't say she believes me, but she said, she's like, I think I knew what was going on, you know? At that point, she had to, because she used to call me a slut and shame me, how I dressed. So she must have known for quite a while. She sat me down and she's like, you know, this is going to tear our family apart. She's like, we can move out of state, you know, I'll be by you when you decide to take to court. She's like, but this will rip us apart. You know, we're gonna have to worry about financial problems, you know, where are we gonna stay? This is embarrassing, it's gonna be publicly out. And I said, okay, Mom, I love you. I'll tell them it was a lie. So I did that. I recanted. A couple years later, the subject came up again. And honestly, I can't remember how it came up again, but it came up again. And I decided to do something about it. And I believe I was 17. And my investigator, he decided to give me a chance. And this was right after I ran away. And we lived even closer to Palmer now. We only had 2 acres. And we still had 2 horses somehow, after having 5. But I ran away, and the investigator found out because people started saying, oh, somebody, you know, this person's been missing, I wonder what happened. So that was noticeable. And he asked me, what do you want to do about it? He's like, I just want this to stop. I had to do something about it. I didn't have enough written down or for confession-wise. So I did this special case, China doll case, where they tape a recorder onto you, on your thigh, on your shoulder, anywhere they can hide it. And I knew how to juice up my dad. So I met him at a car's parking lot out there in Palmer, before they moved, of course. I sat there in the car with him, we talked. I got a little information out of him, enough to take him in. And after that, it was about 2 years. 2 years in court. I was able to put him away. And I'll wrap this up really quick, but after that I went to OCS. I went through custody, and I got into 2 different foster families. One had me for a year, and another one had me for my senior year, which I graduated on time, surprisingly. And people always ask me the meaning of family, and then ask me experiences of being homeless, if I've ever experienced that. And I have, briefly before I went into OCS custody, and I had to stay undercover. I had to get away from my father, because he was trying to track me down, or my brothers were. So I'm thankful for the experiences I've had with the families that took me in. And now today, I have my chosen family. And I'm so proud of Oliver putting this all together. And he really has become my chosen family and my other friends. So I want to say thank you, Oliver, for putting this together, and thank you for listening to me.
This next person, to me, and I've talked to her about it, is like kind of came out of nowhere. One year while Samuel, who is the other person who helped me with Anchorage Transgender Community, we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do for Pride? We're supposed to do things for Pride. And then this wonderful human being just showed up at HTC one, and she was like, I'll do it. I'll take care of it. I got it.
We love you, Skylar.
And we were so thankful because, I think that for a long time there wasn't as much of a transgender transgender and gender nonconforming presence at Pride. And that kind of pushed, Skylar was like, we're doing something, right? And I'm gonna help it out, it's gonna happen. And so we ended up doing something that year, and she ended up wrangling a bunch of the ATC members to do some tie-dye, which usually it turns out great. I never participate because I'm not skilled at tie-dye, and I will not. It would just be brown. That's every time I do tie-dye, it's just brown. It's not pretty. No, nobody wants a brown tie-dye. But anyway, before I get too off track, I want to again welcome Skylar. She's a trans woman, and obviously uses she, her, hers pronouns.
Thanks, Oliver. And in case it wasn't clear, I did exist before 2 years ago. I didn't appear out of nowhere. I was born in the normal way as a chrysalis. All right, how's everybody doing? Halfway through. Thank you all for coming out. It's been great turnout. Thank you to everybody who's spoken so far. I'm coming for you next. People are coming next. So tonight's theme is about overcoming adversity, and I want to show you what overcoming adversity looks like. And I don't mean me specifically, I mean smile, I mean happiness, and I mean contentment. Because oftentimes when you think about and come up against bigotry and hate and prejudice, you can kind of lose sight of what winning feels like and what the end goal is. So, growing up, fairness was really important to me. My parents just nodded. And it still is. And so back then, fairness meant equality. That's the way I understood it. And it meant absolute equality. And that got into kind of eye for an eye stuff. And there's even like a poster on my first and second grade class wall that said, fair is not always equal. And I had no clue what that meant. And they even asked me to explain it one day, and the best example I could come up with was, well, what if I want a cookie and my friend doesn't want a cookie, so I eat his cookie too? Does that count? So reductively what it meant was, if a kid hits you, don't hit them back. But more holistically what it means is to treat somebody fairly, is to treat them kindly and help put them in a place to reciprocate that kindness to you and to others. And so I didn't really live up to that ideal, or try to live up to that ideal for a while, because I had a very rigid view of what the world was, what life should be like. And I tried to make the world fit that shape because it was fair. And just because it didn't make sense and it wasn't fitting for the world, damn it, it was a fair shake. Damn it. So thrilling to be so edgy. For example, I expected that all women thought essentially the same and wanted essentially the same things, and anything that was out of that realm was, just a result of religion or the patriarchy or oppression. And this continued into my own transition, where I set up those boundaries for me. And I discovered that none of it's all that black and white. And frankly, trying to enforce those kinds of black and white rules, that's the symbol of patriarchy and oppression. Not that one might think differently than another. So around this time, I saw the documentary, What the Bleep Do We Know? Which, if you haven't seen it, is a movie about quantum physics. Kinda. Except that the takeaway message is that if you believe really hard, completely, then the world's going to change to fit that belief. This is not true. I want to be clear on this. That's not true. Like, I got a physics degree. I've studied some quantum mechanics. It's not true. That's not how Heisenberg's uncertainty principle works. That's not how string theory works, and that's probably not even true anyway. It's nonsense. But it is really attractive to somebody who is very uncomfortable with themselves and their body. And so I became obsessed with this idea that I just need to believe differently, and reality is going to change to fit what I want. It made a great amount of sense to somebody with a great fair plan that the world just needed to fit into. So I began doing a weird, warped kind of meditation. And not like normal meditation where, you exist within your body and you let your body feel what it feels and you live in the moment and don't let those thoughts stick around. Instead, I was trying to lose contact with my body as much as I could and then convince myself that I would of other feelings for my body to feel. Then all I had to do was convince myself that that was actually what I felt, and presto changeo, everything's great. On a side note, who I wanted to be at this time was a character from a Tron video game, which is really hilariously embarrassing to remember. Not even a main character, a side character. Like one line. But so from that point on, all I would have to do is just believe that, there's no war, there's no hate, no poverty, no hunger, everybody thinks the same, and that's all great. And no, I did not get the irony of this when I was reading 1984 at school at the same time. However, the class I was reading that book for, on Fridays, at the end of the day, the last 15 minutes, we also had a meditation session. So this was the perfect time for me to practice. And I lay on the floor with all of my classmates, trying not to put my feet on their hair, and they put their arms at their sides. I crossed mine over my chest like a mummy because I thought it was cool. And then while the teacher was trying to lead us in meditation, I was trying to tune her out. I would imagine the bounds of my body and feel them, and then imagine what it would feel like if they were different. So I kept this up for a long time. And after about a semester, I began to believe it was actually working. Like when I, opened my eyes or heard somebody speak, I would lose focus and it would all fall back to where it had been. But, you know, I began to believe, you know, when I'm focusing, it is different. And then I had a moment of reflection. See, I watched that movie again, and the conclusions just didn't quite add up. And I realized that the people they were interviewing were just a bit too crazy. And it was probably all bull. And I also realized that in the back of my mind, I always expected I was going to realize it was all bull. And furthermore, what I expected was something like, you know, I'd be falling off the cliff, and then when I hit the ground, I'd realize that gravity exists regardless of how much you believe in it, and that you shouldn't try to test if you can fly by jumping off a cliff. But I also realized that, you know, if I expect to realize that this isn't real, if I expect to not believe it, then I don't believe it. And what's the point of going on to that dramatic conclusion, especially to that one? So I started listening to my teacher during meditation, and I started trying to find ways to be happy that didn't rely on delusions. And many years later, after my transition, long after a lot of this had been resolved, I made friends with a guy who had a very similar story in that he didn't believe his girlfriend had broken up with him. Not that she didn't mean it when she said it, but she literally hadn't said it. And she continued to not be saying it. And this ended him up in custody and later in a psychiatric institute. And I was asking him about this, and he was saying that, you know, at some point you realize that reality is still there. And it's not the moment when somebody tells you, no, you're wrong. It's the subtle moments where it exists in spite of you. So, the author Philip K. Dick wrote that reality is that which, when you cease believing in it, continues to exist. Which is pithy, but a fairly accurate definition, I think. And turns out there's a lot of reality out there. There's whole cities, countries even, that exist. And along with it, ideas and thoughts and ideologies that also exist. And they may not be true. They may not be good to hear. But they exist. And you can't treat them like they don't exist. So this is where I get back to fairness and to adversity. Because when you fight against bigotry and hate and intolerance, it can be demoralizing when you're reminded that it still exists. When an election doesn't go your way, or the result is a lot closer, or you just hear somebody say something terrible in the grocery store. But you can't try to fight it like it doesn't exist. Like, all you have to do is tell everybody how much you believe it doesn't make sense, and then everybody believes it doesn't make sense, and then it's gone. Because, unfortunately, it does make sense to people. That doesn't mean it's right or acceptable, but it has to change your approach. And you can't approach it with demands or accusations. You have to approach it with fairness, with kindness that helps engender kindness in them.
Every time Skylar speaks, I forget that I think this thought. I was like, she'd be an amazing stand-up comedian someday. She's very good at slipping in those jokes into like places where you're like, that was kind of awkward, but now it's funny. So, our next speaker is going to be someone I haven't known super long, but my first experience with him was like, oh my god, this person is intelligent. People don't know me very well. My background is in anthropology, and so I like to talk about intellectual things far too often, and most other people are like, oh my god, my brain is tired, I don't want to talk to you right now about this stuff. And he's one of those people who's always been like, yeah, sure, let's talk about it, let's overanalyze it and just pull it apart. And I'm like so thankful to have him to do that with. So our next speaker is Matt. He's a transgender man, and not preferred pronouns, just his pronouns is he, him, his.
Is this good? Okay, great. All right. So, when Oliver asked me to do this, at first I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. And I thought that, maybe I would talk about something that was trans related, but, I didn't quite want to do that because I think a lot of people think that being trans is the only thing about me, and it's like the biggest thing about my identity, but actually it's not. I have other parts of me. And so I actually wanted to talk about my experience with chronic illness, because that actually had the biggest impact on me so far in my life, and so, yeah, thought I'd just talk about that. So, when I was 11 years old, I got this autoimmune disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And for those of you who don't know what it is, and I assume most of you don't, it's this really rare autoimmune disease. Only like 1 in 100,000 people get it. Like it's rare. And so I was one of those unlucky people who got it. And so it's fairly severe. Basically, what happens is that your immune system starts attacking your nervous system. And when your nervous system is being attacked, you can experience muscle weakness and paralysis and a whole host of other neurological symptoms, which is what happened to me. And so, yeah, it can become really severe really fast. The way it happens is that some people, like a few weeks after onset, will be most affected by it. Like their symptoms will be most severe a few weeks after. For other people, it kind of depends. Some people, it can be a few hours, or it can be a few days. And basically, if you don't get it treated in time, then you can basically die because you get paralyzed. Like it can be ascending, and it can go up, and it can hit your respiratory system, and then you can just, die. So, yeah. So this is kind of how it happened for me. I was 11. I was in 6th grade at the time. I first kind of noticed it when I was in gym class, because I started getting tired more usual than the other kids. And I mean, that wasn't necessarily not normal for me. I was always kind of like a slow runner. Like I just was never good at gym. But then I actually started tripping a bit. And at first, it wasn't that noticeable. Like people trip all the time. Like it's not a big deal. But over the next couple of weeks, the tripping just started to increase. And so my gym teacher had taken notice, and he had called my mom. He's like, hey, your kid is really not doing as well as the other kids in his class, and he's kind of, he had fallen today, like, I'm just kind of letting you know. And so he let my mom know, and it didn't seem like a big deal at first, but then I started getting really tired. And I would come home from school and I'd be absolutely exhausted. Like, I'd have to go straight to bed. And then, walking up the stairs started becoming really difficult. It's weird as an 11-year-old getting winded by the time you got to the top stair. Like, it's just an odd thing, because 11-year-olds, yeah. So, and yeah, over those, it was around a three-week period when all of this started happening. And so, then my joints started aching, and I was like, that's weird. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just not drinking enough water. Maybe I'm just not eating enough. Maybe it's the stress of middle school, which it's not even that stressful, really. And so, I finally, I had talked to my mom about it, and I was like, I really don't feel good. So she had took me to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician had said, it was just growing pains. It'll be fine. I'm fine. I'm a healthy 11-year-old. I will get through it, right? And so, by that point, it wasn't so bad to the point where I couldn't walk. I could still walk, but it really just had started getting a lot worse from there. I think by the time I saw my pediatrician, within about like a week and a half, I was hospitalized. And so right before I went into the hospital, I was basically falling everywhere. I really couldn't walk. I had to crawl up the steps. I started getting double vision, which was odd because, people really don't have that. So, and then the day I was admitted to the hospital, I woke up one morning and my toes felt super weird, like weirder than normal. I mean, imagine your foot falling asleep. You know how, and it falls asleep and it just won't quite wake up yet, and you're kind of waiting? That's how it felt, but like it wouldn't go away. And so it had been a few hours, my toes were still numb. And so, I told my mom, I was like, hey, I'm like, my toes aren't waking back up. This is kind of weird. And so then, obviously, as any parent would, she immediately rushed me to the hospital, because I was very, very ill at that point. And so when I got there, all I remember, it's weird because like I remember quite a bit, but like it's bits and pieces. And so when I had gotten there, I didn't have to go to the ER, which was cool. I literally just went straight to the children's hospital, so that was nice. And then when I got there, the doctors just started asking me all of these questions, like just question after question. And I was like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I'm 11 years old. It's like, And so they asked me all these questions, and they started running all of these, tests and neurological assessments on me. Like, they would have me try and move my toes up and down. They would push on my legs, and I would have to like hold them up, and they would show me their fingers like this and ask me how many, they were holding up. And obviously, I said 4 because I was still seeing double vision. So, yeah. And then, the doctors really had no idea what was wrong with me. Seriously, they genuinely didn't know, because it's such a rare disease. Like, you just don't see it that often. And so, especially, as a kid, they initially thought that it was cancer, and they didn't know if they would have to send me to Seattle Children's or not. But they ended up not, and so they were thinking that it might be Guillain-Barré syndrome, And so one of the ways that you test for that is you do a spinal tap. And the spinal tap hurts so bad if you don't know what it is. Basically, they stick a giant needle, it's like this long, and they put it in your spine, right in between, it's like a space between your bones, and they collect your cerebrospinal fluid, and they kind of check just, if your proteins are elevated and if you have, elevated high blood cell counts. And for me, I had a really high protein level, and I think it was a normal white cell count, I'm not sure. But that's indicative of Guillain-Barré syndrome. And obviously, with my symptoms, I was becoming paralyzed, so that wasn't hard to, figure out. But yeah, so I ended up getting immunoglobulin therapy, or IVIG as it's also called. And that was supposed to be for 5 days. In the first 3 days, it really wasn't working. And so the numbness spread from my toes to my feet around the first day. And then the second day, the numbness spread from around my foot to probably around my knees. And then by the third day, it had moved all the way up to my hips, and I couldn't feel anything. It was really weird. So it's a very strange feeling. Like, being paralyzed is, it's not fun. It's not at all. So yeah, I just started getting paralyzed, and it started becoming harder to breathe. So I would be really tired because my muscles were just not working as they should have been. And so it started becoming harder to breathe, and then it started becoming harder to swallow and talk and chew. And my hands, it started becoming harder to control them. Like if I would grab something, oftentimes I would just drop it, and like I wouldn't be able to write at all because you need, fine motor skills to do that, and I really didn't have any. So yeah, I think by day 3, it's when it started getting really bad. But then the IVIG started working, and I don't know why. I mean, it's great, but it's just odd that it started working like day 3. It would have been nice if it worked, day 1, but besides the point. So yeah, I got IVIG, the paralyzation stopped, and then, started going away. I was able to breathe normally again. I lost a lot of muscle though, so I had to be in a wheelchair for about 9 months afterwards. Initially, for kids, it's not supposed to take that long to recover, because kids can bounce back from things fairly quickly. And so I was in I was in a wheelchair. No, actually, that wasn't too bad. I'm gonna be real. Everyone thinks that being in a wheelchair is like this awful thing, and actually it's not. It's really not. Like, people are, yeah. So, anyways, after I got out of the hospital, I did do a lot of physical therapy, like a lot. It was honestly the worst thing about recovery because it was so boring. Like, it was so painfully boring. I can't describe. And it was like a few times a week too. And occupational therapy, oh my God, it was 1,000 times worse. I mean, like, we didn't do anything. It was just, yeah. So I had to do that for about 9 months after I got sick, and I went through that, and that was okay. A lot of people think that the hospitalization, like the symptoms themselves, is like the worst thing about being sick. But actually, I've come to realize, that's not true. I really don't think that's true. I think it's the aftermath of it. I think it's the having to adjust to a new and different body, you know, to adjust to a different reality, basically. I mean, everything that I thought I could do, I couldn't. Well, maybe not everything, but yeah. And it felt like I just lost my body. Like I just didn't know it anymore. I mean, it's hard to explain, but like you go from being an 11-year-old kid who is carefree, is happy, can do whatever, like, you know, and then to go from that to being unable to walk, to being unable to take care of yourself, you know, to not being able to having to have help shower, like that was a huge adjustment for me. I think emotionally, like it was just really taxing. I had a lot of pain afterwards. The nerve pain was really, really bad. There were many times where I felt like I genuinely wanted to like kill myself. And at times it got so bad, like I really thought about it. Like I genuinely was like, no, like I think I'm gonna do it because there's no hope. Like there's no medication helps. Like, you know, and I was like 13 or 14 or 15 at the time. I don't know how anyone expected me to actually deal with this. Like I was a child basically when this happened. And so it was difficult for many years. I suffered from a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. But eventually, over time, it actually started to get a lot better. And I think the biggest thing was that I kind of had accepted what had happened. At first, it was really angry. I was like, fuck this is horrible. How can anybody say that this was like, you know, an okay thing? Like, this was terrible. I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And so, over time I realized, yeah, that's not true. Like, it wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me. Like, yeah, it was shitty, it sucked. Like, seriously, it sucked. But, you know, I mean, accepting the fact that, like, yeah, you're going to be in pain for probably the rest of your life. Things are going to be different. You are going to have to adjust to a new body. And I really had to come to terms with that. So, yeah. And then also I kind of reframed the idea of being sick. Because I think a lot of people think that it's very detrimental. But I kind of thought about it as it was an opportunity, I guess you could call it. I got a lot of personal growth out of it, which sounds weird saying now, but seriously, it's true. Like I grew a lot as a person. Like I matured. I mean, I had to. Like I you know. So yeah. I felt like I had more to say. Totally forgetting like what I was going to talk about. You know what? Oh well. I'm gonna end it shortly. So yeah, that's kind of the story of how I got sick. And yeah, it sucked, but I'm here, I made it, I didn't kill myself. Like, I think that's good enough. You know? When it comes to overcoming adversity, I think I've hit the bar, you know, I have made it. So yeah, I really don't know how to end this other than, yeah, I'm just gonna end this, yes.
So I approached Matt because he showed interest last time we did this event for Transcending Tales that he wanted to speak. And he was like, yeah, I'll speak. And then he like sent me a text and he was like, I can't think of anything. And I was like, it doesn't have to be trans related, dude. it's literally anything. You can come speak about any kind of overcoming adversity you've had. And he was like, okay, cool. And I was like, sweet, now we understand. Right. But this next individual is someone I have only known very briefly.
Just the beginning, Oliver.
It's just the beginning of my relationship with this individual. I enjoy all of my conversations with them because they're like, yeah, that makes sense. And they're like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. We're both in that place of, like, I don't know why that made sense at the time. But anyway, our next speaker is Evie. They use they, them, their pronouns, and they are genderqueer.
Forgot to mention I'm also awkward as fuck.
You fit in perfectly.
Alright. So I've got a little mix of kind of my tale for you, a little educational narrative essay mixed with some slam poetry. So we're gonna kind of visit towards the end a like 90s alternative cafe with, you know, exposed brick wall. You must live to tell. You must speak out your gut, drill in the land of your memory, dig out the stories in your inner landscape. As Rainer Maria Rilke put it, you ought to let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. You ought to dive into the depths of your despair and float vividly like branches on running water. This is your gift. It shall not be wasted. It cannot be shut down. Your gift is a living thing, so write it and let it live. This is the educational narrative essay that I wrote for a writing class in Portland State University. So here it goes. It is not just the flesh. In December of 1989, mother went into labor. 2 eyes and 10 toes squinted and wriggled, screaming at baby's introduction into the world. The healthy child had void of protruding flesh. Thus, when nurse filled mother's arms, her and father looked down at their fresh bundle of drooling love and thought, what a beautiful baby girl. Letting angel fine wisps of hair tickle her sweat-beaded nose, mother breathed in the delicate spot of scalp that produced warm hope for an enriching life and let rest overcome her. The next few winters flew by in conglomeration of sister dressing 2 eyes, 10 toes, and crushed velvet dresses with scratchy lace trim and matching hair bow. Sister would exclaim, "You are so pretty," as particles of aquanet sizzled on the curling iron surface. Mother and father had bestowed a life-size doll upon sister, so it is proper they have matching curls. A doll's humanity does not go deeper than silicone flesh. A doll is empty inside, and its sole purpose is ornamentation. Sister paid no mind to the red splotchy face stained with snot bubbles as she beamed a proud smile upon completion at her job well done. Mrs. Bombeck thumbed through papers with spit-moistened finger. The names written at the top of the page were wobbly like newborn Bambi legs. Kelly, Hannah, Travis, Bridger, Samantha, Bridger, Rob. Flipping back to the previous page and letting out an exasperated sigh with enough momentum to fluff her blonde-kissed white feathered hair, she uncapped her looming red marker. The ink spread across the fibers of the paper in an X, louder than the graphite plea of a student. This one had written Tyler last week and Sean the week before that. In her perfectly practiced dictation, Mrs. Bombeck lettered out a beautiful feminine name and thought to herself, maybe it's time I retire. I'm not getting enough salary to punish a first grader every week for playing name games. Mother took her children to the homeless shelter on the weekends where she volunteered. Sister brought the Walkman and coloring books, while 2 eyes, 10 toes brought the Mad Libs and toy cars. Employees taking turns on their lunch break would comment on how well-behaved Mother's son and daughter were. Mother would feign a smile and through gritted teeth respond, my daughters are very well-behaved. Father hugged his youngest after a track meet where first place ribbon was being waved around. He stepped back quickly, cheeks red with discomfort, and turned to Mother, Maybe it's time we talk about bras, eh? An embarrassed 13-year-old shifted in well-worn athletic shoes, crossed arms over newly bosomed chest, and appealed to mother with sweat-flushed eyes. Father's repulsion extinguished any pride just as quickly as the perspiration evaporated, leaving granular shards of salt on fragile skin. For this tomboy, bodily development was a weakness. In the fluorescent washed, recirculated air of the local department store, a compromise was made between mother and the pubescent teen sports bras. It was not the same as the bare-chested days in the yard weeding, where tissue under nipples had no development to distinguish the accompanying genitalia and how that supported one's freedom of expression. In this bra-buying moment, 2 Eyes 10 Toes was faced with growing up and how that means making sacrifices. Growing up also means social pressure to fit in, look cool, and placate the curves of bodies. Maybe wearing a tighter tank top isn't so bad after all. It can be paired with a set of black punk pants, Doc Martens, and patched denim jacket. All kinds of bodies seem to don those threads, 2 eyes and 10 toes, with equipment underneath and in between that didn't matter what, it was just fun to touch. Sister asked how much touching had been done because she'd been touching with Danny, and isn't it fun to touch boys? It was not told to her that closing your eyes lets you pretend to be both bodies, doing twice the touching and twice being touched, and no one cared who had what part or where it went. Deep-throating anticipatory butterflies, writhing friction of exchanging mucus, shuddering thighs and carnal groans that equalize us all. Have you had your womanly time yet? It was off to the doctor for a daily prescription and a one-sided conversation about adolescent hormones. Mother did not know that hormones could wreak such havoc on one's mind if you put more in that body than that person felt that there's too much of the hormones to begin with are. 2 Eyes 10 Toes tried quitting life because it got to be too fucking hard going one way but didn't want to go completely the other way. And what were even the ways that people went, and how would mother and father or the OBGYN or the Mormon psychiatrist or the ER nurses or sister understand that when 2 Eyes and 10 Toes could not even understand it because no one ever talked about it. Those people wanted to know, why would you do that to yourself? I was just really tired, so I wanted to get some sleep. Fighting duality is exhausting. 2 Eyes and 10 Toes survived. In May of 2009, mother and father moved to Oregon, bringing their newly admitted PSU student. Registration was completed. 4 classes, financial aid, emergency contact with mother, and sex is F. Professors, students, and school admins were unaware of how hard that F further encased the entire human within the shell of his body, a strangled fetus yearning for birth, breath, and cultivation with all the hope that mother had smelled since that day in 1989. They were ignorant to the barbed, rusty spool twisting around inside, and how long it had been there doing just that, hollowing, scraping, gouging the same soft flesh over and over. And M felt just as torturous. Social sustainability professor asked 2 Eyes 10 Toes to stay after class one day. Here's a book I think you would really like. Come to me if you have any questions. The cover read author, bell hooks. 3 years, 217 books, 40 women, gender, sexuality studies credits, and 36 counseling sessions later, there's an elevator ride in a building on PSU campus. 2 Eyes 10 Toes felt the heat radiate off a stiff, standing F, an elderly embodiment of what had plagued 2 Eyes 10 Toes' entire life. The elevator, filled with silence and abhorrence, was stirred only when she parted her lips, passing off as a white boy. You ain't fooling nobody. I see them titties. There's no dick up in your pants. What the fuck is this world coming to? Today, my skin doesn't fit me. Nothing is really wrong. Some days it just feels like a shirt with the shoulders too small, my pants cut a little too short, the fabric pulls tight in all the wrong places, and I keep trying to stretch it out, but I can't get my body inside, and maybe I shouldn't be trying to wear this at all. Maybe some part of me needs to be cut the fuck away and sewn up again, and then I feel comfortable in the skin. Get me a fucking tailor. Tear off the seams and remake me into something the world can understand. I am so tired of being told I am not real when I'm standing in front of you. So tired of having to explain myself to you when you will never fucking need to. You will tell people your gender pronouns over and over and over again until you wonder if you are speaking the right language because it seems like they can't understand. The sheets fall from their mouths like drop stitches, mistakes in a pattern they don't even realize they are following. Note to self, making yourself visible does not mean that you will be seen. I am so tired of hearing apologies. Yes, I know, you've known me a long time. Yes, I know, you were trying. Yes, I know, my gender is hard for you to remember. Trust me, I know. I have spent my whole life forgetting myself, fitting myself into boxes, bending over backwards for someone else's standards, shrinking myself a size too small, and pretending it felt right. This is not an alteration. This is mending. I am not becoming someone else. After all these years of reflection, I want to look in the mirror and see myself. I will not shrink my soul to fill your role, and asking me to dim my light just makes me feel sorry for you.
So that was our last speaker. Please give Evie a round of applause. And please give all of the speakers up here a round of applause. I guess when I sort of dreamed up this event in my head, like, one of the things that I think I was always worried about is, would people come? I think sometimes, like, we have these ideas about events and we have these setups and we have all of the things that we want to do them, but that is always the question, will they come? And so I want to thank all of you for being here, and I want you to thank all of you for listening to these people's stories, because what are stories without the people who hear them? I want to thank all of these individuals who have come out to share some very personal information about themselves. It's not the easiest thing to do, sharing yourself with other people. It exposes you to vulnerability. I think all of us are afraid of that. And that these people are so willing to share that story is amazing. So again, these are amazing people. This is the end of the event, but I encourage all of you to stick around and come and actually speak to these people, because they have so much to learn and they have so much to teach.
My dad's always been my God.